Why the lie, Richard? Why the big cover-up?
I don't know, but the lying is epidemic. And it's not only the projects themselves, but it's the if you will, the social technology of compartmentalization that permits, the mass deception of society by concealing the activities of very large numbers of human beings in society. And this social technology of compartmentalization is extremely advanced and widely used by the military-industrial espionage complex. And there's also the question of the funding for these things. You've interviewed Catherine Alston Fitts.
Yes, all the time.
Yeah, she's quite knowledgeable about this, and there's no question that trillions of dollars have been sucked out of the federal budget and out of the economy in general. It's been sucked out of our pockets, literally. This money's been taken from us, and it's been lavished on projects and programs about which we are told little or even nothing whatsoever. And I'm back to one of my main points. It's our money. We deserve to know. We ought to know. We should know.
How do they cook the books? How do they hide the money?
A lot of ways. Bill Gawley, in the book I mentioned at the outset of our interview, Breaking Cover, told how already back in the 50s and 60s, the American military used what was essentially a shell game, where they would funnel money from the Army through a little-known engineering office in the Chesapeake Division of the Naval Engineers. And according to him, it was so adroitly done that even a practiced accountant or a really eagle-eyed spy would have trouble tracing the money. They've only gotten better at it in the last half century, and the amounts of money involved now are just mind-boggling, off the charts. I've talked about this with Catherine Alston Fitts before, and she said to me, and I agree, that with the amount of money that's in play, this black budget money, which runs evidently into the multiple trillions of dollars, that with that amount of money you can do anything at all. You
probably makes the TARP money look like loose change, Richard, doesn't it?
It does, because we're talking about trillions of dollars by those standards. We are being mugged. The American people are being shook down. It's frankly a very organized crime. It makes sense to speak of the United States government at this point as a criminal syndicate, as a massive global money laundering operation.
Any records that you stumble across about any catastrophes that could have occurred during construction of these tunnels and these bases or anything like that?
Well, I can tell you that in general, construction work is dangerous work, and mining is dangerous work. So I don't have any doubt that men would be killed constructing these projects. But if it's a clandestine project, of course, there would not be an obituary in the local paper saying Joe Schmo was killed working on a top-secret compartmentalized program underground. There would be a cover story to account for the death if it was publicly acknowledged at all.
Richard, tell us a little bit about where you get this book. You put a lot of work into it, didn't it?
Yes, I have. I spent years working on this one. I did devote more time to it than some of the others. And the best place to get it is at keyholepublishing.com, and the links are up on your website. If people want to check that out, they can click right through. Of course, they can also get it at amazon.com.
As you look at what has been going on, the fact that we're not going to be told about it, can we assume that if an event occurs, let's use the old astronaut for lack of a better, is it going to be one of these things where it just hits us and then they tell us, or they run around and it's panic mode?
I really don't know, but what's clear to me at this point is the United States government is a rogue regime. We see criminality on every hand, not only with the bailout bills and the TARP funds and stuttering officers from the Federal Reserve who come to Congress and just point blank lie about the disposition of trillions of dollars under their control. The whole system is wildly out of control, and what we see is incompetence and criminality run amok right across the gamut of federal agencies, from one end of the United States government to the other. It's a mess, George, and I think the American people understand this at this point. So, go ahead.
Who do you think's in charge?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? We have a president who's transparently really good at reading teleprompters. So who writes all that stuff on the teleprompters? Beyond that question, who's really in charge at the Federal Reserve? Because we have officers of the Federal Reserve, whether it's Ben Bernanke or the chief financial officer, who will come before the Congress, and you read their remarks in the transcript, and they're impactful. They're spouting nonsense. It's just indecipherable. It's not intelligible by a person of a normal mentality. So who is in charge, and who actually writes this nonsense that's spouted, whether by Ben Bernanke or Barack Obama or Timothy Geithner or any of them? I have been told that there is another level higher up, that someone like the President or United States Senators or the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff or the Queen of England, say, or the Pope, in the Vatican and so forth. These people have a degree of power in their sphere of action or of influence, but that they, in a sense, are puppets for other power brokers that stay in the shadows, who run the so-called shadow government, and that there is a degree of global or international cooperation. There is not really any publicly known name for this organization. I've heard it referred to simply as the organization, or the foundation. In one case, one person refers to this shadowy agency as the foundation, but having been around for a long time and operating over a long period of history. What the ultimate agenda is, I don't know, but you could make a good case that it is to enslave the human race, because that's where we're headed.
When you first started uncovering these things, specifically the bases, did you believe it? Did you believe it yourself?
Well, I was amazed at first, George. I was really kind of astonished. When I did the first article for UFO Magazine, I really had the feeling that I'd exhausted the topic, and it wasn't until I had the voice speak to me in the night over the holidays in 1992 and tell me right out of thin air, and I'm not exaggerating here, I heard a voice right out of thin air that spoke in my inner ear that said, as clear as a bell, the underground bases are real. I now understand that the alphabet soup agencies have brain transmitters, if you will, that permit the transmission of intelligible speech directly to the auditory cortex of the human brain. So this is not science fiction. It's not magic. This is nuts and bolts electronic engineering, and decades old, by the way. So someone wanted me to inquire into this subject more deeply, and I have, and continue to do that. But I was astonished when I started first going into the primary documentation, looking in the federal documents, military documents, and going to the engineering literature, looking in the corporate documentation and so forth. Yes, I was amazed at some of what I ran across. And at first, yes, I believed it, but I was at the same time almost flabbergasted to discover these things. And that persisted maybe for about 6 months or so until I got the lay of the land a little bit and began to understand there's a lot going on underground, and now I also understand there's a lot going on undersea, and we have been so massively lied to. It's disappointing. It's dismaying that we have people who will presume to be working for us, and really they're psychopaths. We're talking about pathological lying here, George. It's disappointing.
And I'm sure they've got their ticket when the time comes to be.
Well, they do. They do. If they're on the inside, they do have their ticket. And there's a certain amount of smug one-upness or one-upmanship associated with this, which, by the way, I don't like either.
It's kind of like the old movie Eyes Wide Shut, isn't it?
Well, it is. And I thought that was a very good movie. It was the last movie that Stanley Kubrick made, and there was a great deal of truth in that. He dealt very much with this corrupt, shadowy organization that pulls strings behind the scenes, and if you cross your path, you're dead. If you cross their path, if they don't like it, you're just dead meat if they perceive that you're interfering with their agenda. And they more or less make whatever laws they want. They break whatever laws they want to. It's their way or the highway. And they're here. Stanley Kubrick was saying, look, these people are here. They're real. They're ruthless. They're without scruples. They're wealthy. They're powerful. And they're running things from behind the scenes.
And they'll do anything they have to do to take advantage of all of us, Richard.
They're doing it now.
Stay with us. What can we do? I mean, we can't go running up to our elected officials and say, we know there's a base there, because they won't admit it. What can we do?
Well, one of the things we can do is inform ourselves. For those who want more information, they could profitably read my books. That's one thing they can do. Another thing that I think is the only possible antidote to corrupt government is to withdraw cooperation from it. So I think ultimately we need to begin withdrawing our money and our support from this criminally corrupt government. With the passage of each year, it seems to become more and more of a problem to the country. It's not helping us. It's taking our money, actually stealing our money. It's theft by taking. It's lying to us. So under those conditions, I think we're entitled to keep our money for ourselves, pull it out of the big banks, pull it out of the government agencies, stop voting Democrats and Republicans into office, and we really need a National Truth Commission to sort some of these things out. Not only the question of the underground and undersea bases, but the conduct of the war against Iraq and Afghanistan, of the assassinations stretching all the way back to the 1960s, and especially and including the false flag attacks of September 11th, 2001.
Yeah, that's a whole issue all by itself, which...
But it's linked to the others.